Today is Friday, December 6th, 2024. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense is getting major pushback. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. Email us, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. And we're getting through the news of the Cray here each and every weekday, bright and early. And joining me today to get through it, CBN's Billy Hallowell and Trey Goins-Phillips, and a lot to get to on the podcast today, as always. And on the focus story, good news clubs get a major victory.
Yeah, it's an encouraging story coming out of Hawaii, so I'm excited to share some of those details here in a few minutes.
Yeah, always good to share a good win, and we will have the details on that on the focus story. On the main thing, Border Patrol agents are seeing a surge in optimism after Trump's election victory. We'll have the details on that on the main thing with CBN's Tara Mergener. Make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, DC Debrief with John Stolnis, Billy's Newsmakers. You can find the links to those in the description of this podcast episode. All right, we are going to head now to the news in 90 seconds. And Pete Hegseth, who was selected by President-elect Donald Trump for defense secretary, is facing misconduct allegations, and his nomination may be in doubt. He visited Capitol Hill to meet with Republican lawmakers regarding his nomination this week. Trump's political team is reportedly a little upset that some of these issues that have arisen have been surprises. They can deal with things as long as they know they're coming, but what apparently is frustrating them is that they didn't know some of these issues were coming and they've been caught off guard. And Trump hasn't personally lobbied for Hegseth in the middle of all this, unlike his prior efforts with Matt Gaetz, who also ended up withdrawing his nomination. And a tsunami warning that had been issued for large portions of the West Coast yesterday had been canceled not long after. The alert caused widespread concern and led to rapid evacuations. The National Weather Service issued its highest level advisory following a 7.0 magnitude earthquake that struck off the Northern California coast early Thursday morning. Authorities anticipated hazardous waves reaching areas as far south as San Francisco Bay and beyond. Sirens sounded across multiple counties. And we are launching a new podcast for Christmas, Jesus and the Christmas Prophecies. And the prophecies of Christmas. We're going to run episodes on this feed starting tomorrow. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out those stories and more over at cbnnews.com. And guys, wanted to talk about this because this is the Christmas season. And of course, we know that it can be so secularized and it can be so, we can get lost in the midst of what the true meaning of Christmas is. And as a culture, speaking, of course. And so we have this great podcast coming up, and it is going to be running for the next couple of weeks. And we're going to launch the episodes on this feed. So you'll see it if you subscribe to this podcast. You will see this in your feed tomorrow. And Billy, why don't you give them a little bit about what to expect in this podcast, because it's really cool.
Yeah, you were just saying something important. I think we sometimes lose the meaning of the season. And with this Jesus and the Prophecies of Christmas, we're going to be doing a deep dive into how prophecy in the Old Testament predicted Jesus and how the Nativity and Jesus's birth is a fulfillment of that. And I know we all know that as believers, but getting a chance to hear from pastors and people like Ray Comfort, Greg Laurie, we've got Joel Smallbone, Shane Eidelman, Jesse Bradley, just some really great people who help explain in some episodes, verse by verse, what that looked like. What was the Old Testament saying? Hundreds of years later, Jesus fulfilling that, why that matters. We're going to look really at everything from Isaiah to Micah, getting into Mary and Joseph and their reactions to the news. And so it's really a deep dive into that. It's 4 episodes, and they're all around 15 to 25 minutes or so. And so I'm really excited about it. For me, getting to work on this got me thinking deeper about all these things, right? Those connections between the old and the new, and really seeing it all as a tapestry and not disconnected. I think so often we we'll look at the Bible as disconnected between the old and the new because of some of the challenges in reading the old that people will have. But this will really help bring some of that together. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, and seeing how Scripture, as far back as Genesis 3, even pointing towards the birth of Christ. So you're right. I mean, the whole of Scripture points to that moment, and it's really great to take a deep dive and go through it all.
All of Scripture is about Jesus, so it's good to have that reminder, right? Especially at Christmas time, that everything is foreshadowing the coming redemption of Christ. And I think it's easy too during the holidays to, even as Christians, kind of like what you were saying, Dan, to get lost in kind of the motions, even the good things, right? You're doing the Bible study and the Advent readings, but we do them every year, and it can start to be just kind of a rote thing that we go through, and we forget about the um, just for lack of a better word, I guess, the magic of all of this, right? The divinity of all of this, and uh, the fact that it is such a profound story that was foretold, that was prophesied. Um, so yeah, I think it's encouraging to hear all of the miraculous stories and Bible verses that led to the coming of Christ. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited to dive into this podcast and listen to these interviews, Billy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to add one more thing here.
Sure.
Whether you're kind of looking, because I want people to understand this is really for everyone. If you're looking to strengthen your faith, this is going to be helpful. So no matter where you are as a Christian, but if you're looking to get some new insights on the Christmas story, things that maybe you haven't thought about, Anna and Simeon and these other characters that maybe we haven't, really looked at deeply in the Nativity story, we're going to get into some of that too. So it's fun.
All right, Jesus and the Prophecies of Christmas. It'll be in this feed tomorrow, and like Billy said, 4 episodes, and we highly encourage you to check it out. And we think it'll be a great tradition you can start going through each Christmas season. All right, we're gonna head over to the focus story now, and good news clubs in Hawaii just got a major victory in Hawaii. What happened here?
Yeah, so the youth organization Child Evangelism Fellowship, which is behind Good News Clubs, they sued the state of California uh, several months ago, earlier this year, through the Liberty Council, and they announced in late November. Liberty Council did that their client had received a permanent statewide injunction, which allowed the Good News Clubs, which is, for those who don't know, it's essentially a weekly extracurricular gathering for students between the ages of 5 and 12 years old, where they can go voluntarily, of course, and they can engage in a Bible lesson. They can learn and recite memory verses. They sing praise songs. They do Bible related crafts and play even some scripture themed games. So this permanent injunction allows Good News Clubs to operate in every school across every district in Hawaii, which was something that was in question earlier this year.
Yeah, and this permanent ruling came after a preliminary injunction. So what's the history there?
Yeah, so in January, Liberty Council filed its lawsuit against Hawaii and education officials there after 4 districts across the islands blocked the Good News Clubs from meeting on public campuses. They said that it was a violation of the separation of church and state. But then in a legal complaint, Liberty Council attorneys argued that by affording school access to secular groups, uh, pretty much without question, but prohibiting faith-based meetings like these Good News Clubs meetings, district officials were actually violating the First and 14th Amendment rights of students there in the schools. So they said you really need to be giving kids access to these groups, which this has been a long-standing issue. It's been in the courts for decades. It dates back all the way to 2001, actually, when this actually went to the U.S. Supreme Court. And ultimately, in the case, Good News Clubs versus Milford Central School, the justices ultimately ruled 6-3 that the school violated the First Amendment rights of Good News Club participants by preventing after-school meetings on campus. So Liberty Counsel said they have never filed a Good News Club lawsuit that they have not won, and they're obviously celebrating this victory too.
Yeah. And so, I mean, really, it is surprising that they would even go after it because, I mean, these good news clubs have been around and they are everywhere. They're in every state. This is not just like a random thing that has popped up. And so what's the response been to this?
So, you mentioned that it's crazy that this was ever even an issue, that there are these good news clubs across the country and pretty much every state. But as this Hawaii victory comes out, Liberty Counsel has announced that it's, quote, preparing another lawsuit against a school district in California where they're seeing a similar issue. Attorneys representing that case said, in that district, every view is welcome except for the Christian club. But when it comes to this Hawaii victory, Fred Pry, the acting vice president of administration for the Child Evangelism Fellowship, the organization behind the Good News Clubs, he said this is a welcomed win not only for CEF Hawaii, but for all Christian groups in the public square. The Constitution is crystal clear that the government cannot discriminate on the basis of religion or free speech.
Yeah, I mean, that's really great. And it is, I mean, we talked about this, I think, even recently on this podcast, guys, that it really does seem to be that Christianity gets singled out and like it's like kids that are participating in these clubs. So it's like they're purposely meant to make it feel like they're doing something wrong and they're doing something dangerous. And this is something that has to be separate from the school. And you keep that over there. And it's the only one that gets singled out most of the time. I mean, very rarely do these after school clubs and that's usually what they are. It's just after school, and you should be able to participate in any type of club that within reason that should be that wants to be there at the school. And clearly a Christian club. I mean, this is most people in America identify as Christians. Like, why is this shocking that they'd want a Christian club at their public schools? But it's clearly a targeting, and glad that they ended up winning that case.
Well, I think it's a reminder too that these individuals and forces that don't want to see these Christian clubs, whether they're atheist groups or Satanist/atheist groups, whoever they are, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep challenging it. It's going to keep happening. And so there's a reason, though, that they win every single lawsuit that they file on the Christian side, because we have a First Amendment. We have the right. You can't tell these groups that they can't be there. But I think this is why Christians and others need to keep on peacefully fighting back and defending those rights, because people will not stop until they get rid of every last one of those clubs. That is the goal. They're not going to tire of it, no matter how many court cases are won.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Trey, appreciate bringing that one to the radar. Again, like we said at the top, it's really great to report on good news. And while it's frustrating that these lawsuits keep happening, like Billy said, probably will keep happening, it's great to see the rule of law and freedom of speech being upheld in this case. Appreciate bringing that to the podcast today. Well, we're going to head over to the main thing now. And Border Patrol agents are showing renewed optimism as President-elect Donald Trump prepares to take office. And this is according to the National Border Patrol Council. Many agents who previously considered retirement are now reconsidering, hoping for a significant shift in immigration policy. Still, a lot of challenges at the border remain very severe. CBN's Tara Mergener has the story.
After years of frustration and overwhelming challenges, Border Patrol agents are expressing optimism about seeing meaningful immigration reform. Part of that is due to Trump policies they believe will prioritize border security and provide essential support for those on the front lines. On a scorching day in the Rio Grande Valley, dozens of Border Patrol agents and their families take a rare break. Music blares and children play as volunteers from Operation Border Blessing serve food and hand out care packages. It's a moment to pause and reflect in a role that leaves little room for respite.
To really let the Border Patrol agents and their families know that they're loved, valued, and appreciated.
As the chaos continues here, border officials say the election results are providing agents a much-needed boost.
We received hundreds of calls, texts, emails, just saying how happy the agents are.
Enthusiasm resulting from a promise of greater enforcement, accompanied by the announcement of Tom Homan as border czar. Border authorities have felt intense pressure since the Biden administration reversed Trump-era immigration policies on day one. By some estimates, more than 20 million people have illegally entered the U.S. since then.
They want to arrest smugglers and criminals that are trying to come across the border illegally. But for the most of this presidency, 3.5 years under Biden and Harris, they've been relegated to this humanitarian mission where droves and droves of people from all over the world with their children are coming across the border.
Among the more frustrating policies for agents is catch and release.
You work so hard, and then at the end of the day, just to see a large amount of subjects being released into our nation, it weighs on you. Not everyone gets vetted, and it's scary seeing people come through the border that you don't know where they're coming from.
Add to that, migrants from more than 160 countries, including 700,000 with criminal records, released into the U.S., as well as an influx of deadly drugs like fentanyl.
We're like the sidelines of a parade route. We see it come through and it goes to your neighborhoods.
Sadly, unaccompanied children are also part of these statistics. And according to a Homeland Security report, an alarming number of them are missing.
Over 300,000 children have been lost under this administration. We don't know where they're at.
Ongoing stress takes a heavy toll on agents' mental health. Since 2021, at least 33 Border Patrol agents have committed suicide, with 14 in 22 alone, the highest number in recent history.
So we've seen what happens to the kids, to the young women, to women in general. We've seen the death.
Staffing shortages combined with recruitment challenges intensify the strain, with many agents leaving, citing burnout and frustration.
There's been an unending flow of humanity across that border for the last 3.5 years, and they see people getting over on the system. They see parole being abused. They see these people being released all over the country.
Members of the media are getting slammed for pushing a narrative that Border Patrol agents on horseback were using, quote, whips.
Public perception only makes the job harder, with agents often portrayed as enemies in this debate.
There's times that we get vilified and we get seen through a different light. The media doesn't really cover the full story or covers a portion of it. And so when you see things like that, it's disheartening.
These are some of the most compassionate, professional people I've ever met in my life. And so to be characterized as heartless or cold or uncaring is anything but the truth.
A change in leadership brings hope they can see the most challenging chapter in their history begin to close. What needs to be done here to help you?
I think the biggest thing is we need to be allowed to start doing our jobs again, and allowing us to enact our policies again.
In response to the suicide rate, improvements in mental health services have been expanded. Meanwhile, many agents are looking forward to increased support and resources that will help them restore border security. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
All right, Tara, thanks for that report there. Interesting to see for sure. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the podcast for one last thing.
We've got 1 Peter 3:15, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. And I think that just perfectly segues with what we were talking about today, the good news clubs and all these battles. You got to fight peacefully, but always be ready to also share the truth along the way.
If we're putting Christ as supreme in our lives, we can't help but model Christ, which is to share the gospel compassionately, but boldly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a verse that kind of convicts you to be always thinking about the gospel and being ready. And a lot, like we said before too, it's easy to go through the roteness of life, the roteness of the holiday season or whatever it might be, and not be ready. So it's a good reminder as we head into the weekend and we head in further to this Advent season. All right, head on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective, Lord willing. That creek don't rise on us. We'll be back here on Monday. God bless. See you then.